This is the Anaphil Interviews, and I'm talking to Judy Churchill. Judy, it's a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you.
Explain to me what it is that you do.
That's a good question. I wear many caps on my head, but one thing you have to take into account is that everything I do has spanned a long career of 30 years, so
Okay.
it sounds like a lot.
Okay.
But what I'm going to tell you goes from the start to the finish.
Okay.
So I started life out as a language teacher, teaching
Okay.
French, English and Spanish. From that I went into corporate training,
Okay.
which was really mainly business English training.
Okay.
At that time I set up my own business doing that in Monaco. From that I went into translating
Okay.
and became a sworn translator at the law courts in Monaco. And then I added a few other bows to my skills, where I got a certain amount of pharmaceutical and medical training in one of the companies that I was working in. So I started branching out on my own again. I set up another business so that I could teach communication skills specifically to the medical and pharma industry.
So you niched your market, basically.
I did niche my market. While I was actually doing that, I was also working for a company called ETS, Educational Testing Service, that deal with all the GMAT, TOEFL and TOEIC tests, and I became their regional director. So I had two niches. I was heavily into the testing market and into the pharma market, without really knowing it, in actual fact. So at that point, the language teaching was really put onto a back burner. And from that, I then started getting asked, from the work that I'd been doing with pharma companies and doctors, where I'd been sort of training them around France, I was asked if I would actually personally coach some of the doctors, and that took me into the area of life coaching. So I suppose today you could say that everything that I do is to do with communication. It's some form of cultural, linguistic, or some form of helping people overcome some form of communication difficulty. But it tends to vary from any one particular year as to whether the bias is corporate training, language training, life coaching, translating. It keeps changing.
And what led you to your career, really?
What led me to my career was practicalities, I think, at the beginning. My mother was actually a language teacher and then became a corporate coach, funnily enough, but I vowed I was never going to do that. I was going to go into retail distribution. And my father comes from a medical veterinary background, so no, I wasn't going to have anything to do with the medical pharmaceutical world. He'd set up a pharma
You did protest.
Yes, exactly. So I was going into clothing and retail distribution, and then I met my husband, and it became very clear that I wasn't going to be doing what I wanted to do in Spain, which was where we first set up home. So what could I do that I knew I was good at? And I knew I was good at languages because I spent a lot of time travelling with my parents. I built up a portfolio of language qualifications. I studied language at university. So I thought, well, one thing I can do is go into teaching. So I became qualified as a teacher and started life out as a pure language teacher. And then we moved to Monaco, and I realised, having dabbled in other areas, in actual fact I was good at teaching, I enjoyed teaching, and so it made sense to me at the time to set up a language teaching business.
Excellent. But you're also involved in a great deal of charity work. Tell me more about that, Judy.
Well, charity work's been something I've been involved in since 5 years old. I think when you come from an Anglo-Saxon background, it's sort of inbred. You get involved in charities. And in fact, the first charity event I ever created was I was 11 years old, and I held a fete in my parents' garden to raise money for Oxfam, unbeknown to them.
Oh, that is absolutely fantastic. Oh, unbeknown to them?
Yes, unbeknown to them. I just decided at my own back I was doing this. But when I came to Monaco, I got involved in one or two local charities straight away because it seemed the natural thing to do. But further on down the line, and now we're going back 9 years, one of my private clients said to me, would I help stage a fundraising event in Monaco for the Outward Bound Trust? Of which I knew a little. And to cut a long story short, I got involved in helping raise funds for Outward Bound UK at the time, of which Prince Andrew was head of the trustees. And it just occurred to me that we didn't really have anything like that in Monaco. So between one thing and another, I asked if I could actually help set up Outward Bound Monaco so that we could help local young people have this wonderful
life opportunities.
Yes. And so I was given permission to do that. And so 9 years ago, I helped set up the charity. I'm now General Secretary of that charity to this day. And we have a course that we run in Monaco every year for local young people. And then we also send local young people to do the 3-week course in the UK over the summer.
It was really nice to give something back to society as well, and to the young, which will, eventually look after us.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It is giving back, and I always say to people,
or paying forward,
yes,
as I always say,
who come to me when they first arrive in Monaco and want to set up various businesses and things, and I say start by giving back before you take.
Yes.
Get involved in local charities, get involved in local associations. If we help young people, we're going to have the payback later on. Because we're going to be living in a world with better citizens, we're going to be living in a world with children who have become well-adjusted adults, because a lot of the people I meet in my work come to me because they're not particularly well-adjusted, and they know that, and they need some readjustment. But if we can start by working on children early enough, we can help them understand that life is tough, but you can overcome the challenges if you have the right tools. So Outward Bound is all about giving children from any background the right tools to be able to cope later on in life and be good citizens.
A structure, isn't it? A good structure.
Yes, it is about structure. It's about discipline. A lot of people think that it's boot camp. But when you look back, a lot of things came from, if you like, military discipline.
A test of endurance, which is not a bad thing,
even
surely.
Training is based on the military.
Yes.
To a certain extent, language teaching is based on structure and discipline. So if you can give people a framework on which to hang other tools that they have, they'll be well equipped in life to be able to go on and exercise whatever they're doing with that structure and discipline, and also help others do the
Judy,
same.
You're a successful businesswoman and a mother of 2 grown-up children. So how did you juggle these 2 very, very important roles?
Well, when I divorced, my children were 6 and 8 years old. So I think a lot of people will relate to that.
Absolutely.
Today. It's a very difficult time because they're not really full-blown children, but they're not babies anymore. So they're struggling with all sorts of their own challenges and emotions. And I think as a single mother, one thing you have to realise is that you can't have it all. You can have a lot, but you have to decide what your priorities are.
That's a very interesting point that you make there, that you've got to decide. And did you have to do that?
I had to make very conscious decisions. I knew that I had to provide for my children, so I had to have a fixed and stable income. So that was the period of my life that I took a full-time job in a pharma company, and that gave me something that gave me sort of some sort of anchorage, so I could be there for the children at the right times of day, although they had to be a little bit flexible because sometimes I was late out of work. But it also made me realise that you have to think in terms of a family unit. You might be a single woman again, but what does that mean for your children? In terms of relationships and other people you might bring in to that sort of family nucleus. You've also got to juggle the other side. You've got to juggle the father and his side of his life and family.
It's to find that balance,
yes,
isn't it?
You've got to find the balance. You've got to be very aware that you're going to have to rely on friends, family. So the more you're anchored within different associations and activities, the more you can rely on local friends that are very, very important. So the people that I had made friends with in, say, for example, the athletics club that I was in at the time, became my anchors and became my support system and became my friends. So you've got to be very aware that you yourself need some sort of outlet for all the difficult emotions that you're going to go through. So it became obvious to me that the fact that I was doing a lot of sport at the time was a good thing. I had that family of friends around me that could help support me. I could get the children involved in sport. That's something you can do as a family. But it was also very obvious to me that I was going to have to give up a lot of professional opportunities that were offered to me that I couldn't take at that particular time. But you have to realise that children are picking up on your different
But they are
emotions
resilient
and things.
as well.
Yes, they're very
they?
resilient. But you're responsible for the fact that you can't really show too much of a of a weak side. If you've chosen to be a single mother, that's a choice. You know, your children didn't choose that.
That's right.
Okay? So therefore, make something of it, make the best of it, and understand that there'll be times later on where you can do whatever you want. The children are not children forever.
That's
it
right.
seems like it at the time. And my mother used to say to me, you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel.
And a very bright one.
Yes.
I must ask you, what advice would you give to somebody who wanted to reinvent themselves?
I think, in fact, reinvention is something I really, really believe in.
Oh, yes.
I think that if you want to reinvent yourself, I'd say, first of all, go for it, but equip yourself for it. Okay?
In what sense?
It's not just a question of saying, this year I want to be. Okay? It's not just a question of thinking about it, I'll do it. You've got to take some form of action. You've got to have a plan. So there were times...
research, would you say?
Research and learning. I've always been a great believer in the fact that if I'm going to educate others, I have to educate myself. So if I wanted to go out and coach and train doctors, I had to be proficient in something that they didn't have. So I would have to be qualified in whatever I was talking about. I would have to be interested in what I was talking about. I'd have to have some form of passion within me to drive me forward. Okay. So it's what I call the 3 Fs, a little thing that I've invented called focus, fire and fun.
Absolutely.
So if you want to reinvent yourself, those 3 ingredients have got to be there. So you've got to be really focused on what you're doing. Get qualified, meet the people who are specialists in that area, glean knowledge from them, become educated yourself, go out and deliver what you want to do with passion.
I must add, or ask I should say, is it okay to stay in your comfort zone, or do you have to move out of that?
That's an excellent question, and I think I'm going to say to you, you have to move out of your comfort zone.
Really?
And that's a little bit like what we do in Outward Bound. The whole point about putting young people through challenges, and myself included, because I've had to do some of the activities with them,
oh, really?
being pushed out of your comfort zone. Once you're pushed out of your comfort zone, you're not really scared about anything anymore, and you grow. You only grow when you take on something new and something challenging, both from the mechanisms of the brain that are going to create those new neurons and those new little synapses, as from a personal point of view of getting self-confidence. And self-confidence, I think, is the key here. Because if you want to go out and deliver something in a reinvented way, you've got to have the confidence to do it.
Absolutely.
Because other people are relying on you for some sort of service or advice. And if you're going to give that, it's not just enough to say, well, you know, I've studied that thing. I've got to have perhaps had some sort of first-hand experience in that area, and also be able to stand up and face some pretty rigorous questioning from people. And putting yourself in a situation where you're forced out of your comfort zone then gives you the confidence to say, yes, I can do it.
Here's to reinvention. Judy Churchill, thank you for talking to me today.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for having me.